Today let's revisit the 12th and 13th generation of motherboards with Biostar Z790A-SILVER. First of all, I do have to say in some terms the motherboard looks a bit naked, but then again it looks quite sharp with the passive heatsinks, the holes in the passive heatsinks as well for better heat dissipation on the VRMs and all the other stuff that we're going to go through. So, as already stated, it supports Intel Core 12th and 13th generation, and right here we have the motherboard and of course Intel Core i5-13600K. Now I ran loads of benchmarks here to give you more insights about the motherboard and how it performs with Kingston Fury RGB DDR5. These are the other ones, it doesn't really matter. DDR5 5600 megahertz. Then we have Kingston KC 4 terabytes. We have the Intel ARC A750. And that'll be all when we're talking about specifications of the build. Basically, one more thing that you need to know is the cooling of the processor, which is Vortex 360 with fusion fans, but not in black and white. I really wanted to go with the theme here, color theme, let's put it this way, but it doesn't matter. I wanted to pair up the blue, silver, black and white all together in a build, so it kind of goes all together with the whole build theme. Let's put it that way. But it doesn't matter. Let's check out the specs. So what we got is PCIe 5.0. Then we have 2.5 G LAN. PCI M.2 4.0, Dr. MOS that integrates drivers, ICs and high side, low side MOSFETs into a small package to reduce switch losses. And then we have DDR5, support for DDR5, digital PWM. And it's basically a standard ATX board with 7-phase VRMs. It supports 4 DIMMs of DDR5 up to 6000 plus OC megahertz. We have two 5.0 x 16 PCI slots and one PCIe 4.0 x 16. When we're talking about M.2 key M, we have two M.2 PCI 4.0 and one M.2 PCI 4.0, which can also be SATA. Then it also supports M.2 key E2230 Wi-Fi Bluetooth module and Intel CNVI. It has some interfaces on the I/O cover, which we will cover later on. Then we have Realtek ALC 1220 7.1 channel 3-port HD audio hi-fi, Realtek RTL 8125B 2.5 gigabit LAN port. Basically that's what we're talking about, features and specifications. Now for the I/O cover, we have Smart BIOS update button, two Wi-Fi antenna ports, one display port which is 1.2 and HDMI port which is 2.1, 5 USB 3.2 generation 2 type A, one Smart BIOS USB port, one USB 3.2 generation 2 type C, one 2.5 G LAN, two USB 2.0 and 3 audio jacks. The design is quite cool, and I would say that in this motherboard what I appreciate is the, let's say, not the covers but the guards around the USB 2.0, the front panel jacks and everything at the bottom, which looks tidier, I would say. There are no pins sticking out. There is literally nothing that you will think, oh, it could break or it might bend, or if I push something in the wrong direction the pins might break, or anything similar to that. Regardless to that, we have 5 PWM headers, which would be cool if it had 3 at the top instead of 2, but whatever. We have one 8-pin EPS and one 4-pin EPS. We have 24-pin as standard. Then we have 2 addressable RGB headers and one RGB header right at the top to control the lights on your fans or whatever you have in those connection types with Vivid LED DJ. And that's basically all except for SATA 3 and USB Type-C that we have. And all in all, we have one passive heatsink on the first M.2 slot. And as you can see, and as I already mentioned, quite interesting design on the passive heatsinks. Even though it has a bit too much shallow parts, I would say, which would result in a much better cooling. So I don't have anything against the holes and everything because they are good for heat dissipation. But if it was a bit thicker, it would maybe transfer more heat from the VRMs and give it a better thermals in that sense. So what we're gonna do is let's check out the results and the benchmark. So AIDA64 Extreme Edition, Intel Core i5-13600K, temperature went up to 64 degrees. Intel ARC A750, temperature went up to 69 degrees with 152 watts of usage and 2400 MHz clock speed. VRM temps on the GPU went up to 70 Celsius degrees. That was for a 30-minute benchmark. Then we have DDR5, as already stated, Kingston Fury Renegade RGB DDR5 2x16GB 5600 MHz. Read speeds went up to 82,571, write speeds go up to 86,058, and copy goes up to 84,325. M.2 Kingston KC 3004 terabytes. In AES SSD, read 6.81 gigabytes and write 6 gigabytes per second. Then we have Autodisk benchmark almost reaching 7,000 megabytes per second in read, and write is 6,100 megabytes per second. Then in Crystal Disk Mark we have read speeds going up to above 7,000 megabytes per second and write speeds going up to 260 megabytes per second. Now Cinebench, Cinebench R23 with 73 degrees Celsius on the processor and 188 megahertz clock speed, multi-score. It actually is interesting because I ran 5 sequential tests with constantly running the benchmark. 22,872, then we have 22,986, and it stayed there about 900, so 22,926, 907 and 937, with single score going up to 1927. Corona 1.3 processor went up to 67 degrees. It finished render at 68 seconds and it got 7,063,000 rays per second. Indigo benchmark, bedroom CPU 0.701 while the supercar 2.512. GPU bedroom 8.753 while the supercar 19.252. Uni Engine Heaven. With this configuration, FPS was 191.8 while the score was 4831. Minimum FPS was 50.3 and maximum FPS was 349.5. And finally, V-Ray benchmark, we got 15,109 V samples. Taking into consideration the RAMs are quite okay when we're talking about benchmark on this board. The M.2 SSD also quite fair enough, I would say. Nothing drastical to be worried about. And I would say that all the performance in general when we're talking about this configuration, CPU and the GPU, with that motherboard really does an okay job. Basically, the thermals are quite alright on the processor. It does go above to 73 degrees Celsius in Cinebench R23, but you can recall from other benchmarks that Cinebench really does pushes the processor to the maximum, and even some other benchmarks. But all in all, I'm really satisfied with, in general, everything that we got when we're talking about thermals and performance and everything all together. The BIOS could get some work done and maybe refresh it a bit and everything else, but it's really straightforward. There's nothing to be worried about. Honestly, it's really easy to use and user-friendly, let's put it, because you have an easy mode and you have a advanced mode and everything can be done through it. So basically, I am satisfied with the motherboard and it really does give a nice performance, and the only shame are the heat sinks that could eventually dissipate the heat a bit more if they were a bit thicker and not so shallow in the middle. So yeah, there's that. So if you think you could pair up with your processor this motherboard, the Biostar Z790A-SILVER, I'll place the link below in the description, and you can most likely run it properly with the 13500K, since I'm getting loads of questions recently on the past Z790 motherboards about that processor, because it really doesn't matter, it will work, it's a 13th generation processor. So finally, if you're satisfied with everything that you saw, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button and click the notification bell, and I will see you quite shortly in a new video. Thank you, bye bye.